Before we jump into today's video, don't forget to scoop up something to munch on at rrgsnacks.com, our online concession stand that has an assortment of beef and bacon jerky, butter toffee peanuts, and gummy sour peach rings. It sounds harmless at first, a husband recalling an old fight, a moment of regret wrapped in nostalgia and softened with an apology. But look closer. There's something deeply chilling in Justin Bieber's recent Instagram caption. He shared a photo of his wife Hailey's recent Vogue magazine cover. In the caption, he said that during an argument, he once told her she would never be on the cover of Vogue. He admitted that it was said at a moment when he felt disrespected. Perhaps he thought his confession was harmless, but if we look a bit deeper, it's not just petty. It's strategic. It's calculated. It's a man trying to wound his wife with precision, aimed straight at her self-worth. In the caption, Justin says, "I thought, I gotta get even." And that sentence alone reveals more about the cracks in their relationship than any tabloid ever could. When a man feels disrespected and retaliates by attacking his partner's success or potential, it's not just emotional immaturity. It's a sign of something deeper, something darker. It shows signs of a man who believes he has the right to emotionally regulate his partner through psychological degradation. In psychology, this is often linked to fragile masculinity. Men with fragile egos are often the most reactive when their sense of superiority is threatened, especially by the women closest to them. It's not that they don't love their partners, it's that they only know how to love from a place of dominance. So, the moment the woman stands tall, is too successful, too visible, or too independent, they feel small. And instead of dealing with that insecurity, they pounce. Justin didn't tell Hailey she was being unfair. He didn't ask for space or try to resolve the conflict. He went for the jugular. He targeted something that mattered to her. Her career, her visibility, her hopes and dreams, and he tried to erase it all. It's the psychological equivalent of stepping on someone's neck just to remind them who's taller. The phrase, "you'll never be on the cover of Vogue," wasn't just mean, it was loaded with intention. It was meant to plant doubt, to dim her light, to reassert control in a moment when he felt his grip was slipping. This is known as identity gaslighting, a term used to describe when someone is subtly undermining the other person's sense of self or potential to keep them emotionally dependent. Justin, despite being globally famous, has long struggled with identity and control. From his chaotic adolescence to his spiritual roller coaster, he's a man who's constantly rebuilding himself from the rubble of past choices. And sometimes, men like that don't want a partner. They want an emotional anchor, someone who will stay grounded while they fall apart. But Hailey isn't that woman anymore. She's become a brand, and with every campaign, every runway, every ounce of praise, she becomes less dependent on him, less accessible, less controlled. Psychologically, that can terrify a man like Justin. According to a study published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, men in heterosexual relationships are more likely to experience subconscious anxiety when their female partners succeed, even when they consciously support them. This means that men may automatically perceive their partner's success as a reflection of their own perceived failure, even if they are not in direct competition. In other words, before Hailey even landed the magazine cover, the mere idea of her being on the cover may have felt like a threat to Justin's masculinity. Not because she did anything wrong, but because his self-worth is so fragile that it can't coexist with her power. That brings us to our next point. If Hailey's career continues to flourish, can their marriage survive? Justin's entire life has revolved around being worshipped, and while fame may change anyone, it does something particularly sinister to young stars who haven't fully developed or matured. It teaches them that adoration is oxygen, that without being idolized, they lose value. So when Justin married Hailey, it may have felt like balance. She was a fan. She was supportive, quiet, and loyal. But the minute she launched her solo brand, it might have destabilized that fantasy. The power dynamic shifted. She's no longer orbiting him. She's her own planet, and some men can't handle that. They don't say it outright. They just chip away at it subtly with jabs, backhanded comments, and jokes that cut like knives. So, what happens when a man's self-worth is tied to being the chosen one, and suddenly the woman next to him is also being chosen? He can't compete, so he tries to subtract from her light rather than expand his own. That's not love. That's ego maintenance. And here's the twist. When he apologizes, it doesn't feel like healing. It feels like manipulation wrapped in vulnerability. In his caption, he wrote, "So baby, you already know, but forgive me for saying you wouldn't get a Vogue cover, cause clearly I was sadly mistaken. On the surface, it's sweet, but the subtext? He's still the narrator. He still gets to decide whether her success is valid because now he admits he was wrong. That's the psychological trap. She may feel validated by his remorse, but the original sin wasn't the prediction. It was the audacity that he had the nerve to say it in the first place. Clinical psychologist Dr. Lindsay Gibson describes this behavior as covert emotional control. People with unmet emotional needs often use subtle degradation to keep their partners tethered. They feel safest when their partner is uncertain because certainty would make them less pliable. That's what makes this dynamic so unsettling. Justin doesn't need Hailey to be small. He just needs her to doubt her bigness long enough for him to feel safe again. And the fact that he admitted it publicly might not be as redemptive as it seems. It could also be performative. It could be a way to keep the image intact so people could praise him for being so vulnerable and self-aware. However, the only one who benefits from that narrative is the man who caused the wound. Perhaps this public apology wasn't really for her. Maybe it was for Justin, to ease his guilt, to preserve his image, to remind the world that he can be humble so long as everyone remembers he's still the center. Because in the end, this isn't a love story. It's a cautionary tale of what happens when a man who's worshipped by millions cannot tolerate the idea of his wife being admired by even one, of how intimacy can become a battlefield not with fists, but with words meant to bruise, of how even the sweetest apologies can mask the darkest truths. Justin's original post painted a clear picture of emotional immaturity, and the backlash was swift and furious. Many were uncomfortable and questioned if this was part of a larger pattern. In response to the outrage, he edited his caption. What he left in its place wasn't a revised explanation or even an attempt to clean up his words. It was just a bunch of emojis. But here's the psychological twist. Removing his words and replacing them with emojis distances him from the emotional accountability of the original post. It softens the impact while maintaining the engagement. It lets him appear remorseful without having to sit in the discomfort of what he actually said. According to Dr. Jessica Stern, a psychologist who studies vulnerability and public emotion, when individuals are criticized for expressions of remorse or confession, they may retreat into ambiguity as a way to reclaim control of how their emotions are perceived. In other words, emojis let him stay in the conversation without being pinned down. It's a tactic we often see in emotionally avoidant individuals who want to be seen as self-aware, but they struggle to stay present in the messiness that their actions created. When you love someone and truly regret hurting them, you don't retract your words when they're met with discomfort. You let them stand. You let people witness your shame. You let the apology live even when it stings. But Justin didn't do that. We're sure Hailey has already forgiven him and moved on. But now the world knows. And the man who once promised to be her biggest fan admitted to being her sharpest critic. Then he deleted the proof, but he didn't take back the harm. He just took back the words. Because some people don't want to be better. They just want to look better while you keep bleeding silently behind the scenes. And as for Hailey, she deserves more than emoji apologies and quiet edits. She deserves a love that never weaponizes her ambition. If you enjoyed this video, let us know down below, and thanks for watching RRG.